Hi guys, welcome to the latest podcast of YarninBlak. Today I've got a really special guest speaker on, one of my friends, who is an author, a social worker, and just an amazing person. You'll love to meet her in a minute, but her name is Aunty Lorraine. Aunty Lorraine, how are you?
I'm not too bad. How's yourself?
Good, good. Thanks for joining us. But before I do start, I'm actually calling in, we're recording this from the land of the Wurundjeri people down here in Melbourne. So I just want to pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I want to extend that to the lands where you're currently on as well and pay respect to elders past and present. And I want to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people that are joining us today. And I also want to acknowledge you as well, Arnie.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Murray from Queenslander. I was actually born in Calcutta country, raised in the Torres Strait, and spent most of my life in Gurumay country in Cardwell, and am currently living on Bindal and Wulgurukaba country. I've not as young as I used to be, so I've done a few things in my life. Went to school, went to uni as a mature age person. My kids are getting ready to leave home, and I decided, I'd start studying social work via distance from Cardwell. Cool. And I forgot to stop.
You've been studying ever since, and I know our viewers won't know yet, but you've done 2 PhDs, and we're going to talk about them in a minute. But can I ask you, what made you want to do social work?
Well, it was a toss-up.
Yeah.
There was another area that I thought, well, because we were running a business and until sort of my husband's health started deteriorating, and I thought either I went on the dole, packed bananas, or started studying, and social work was a natural progression because I was working with the homework program and the ASPA and the ATAS tutoring program, and I've always had a strong social justice bent.
Yeah.
And one particular event, I thought I've got to learn how to do things smarter. Was involved in a really serious dispute with a government department, and I thought I've got to learn to do this smarter because it bloody near killed me. So I started with social work, and I found I was pretty good at it. Ended up, because I was studying distance, ended up with 2 degrees, social science and social work, and an honours project because I did.
Yeah.
And then I decided to do my first PhD.
So what was your first PhD on?
Well, I was going to do it on suicide prevention, like that was the honours, and that was usually if you do an honours, the PhD sort of builds on that. But a lot of people talked to me and said, no, what we really needed was for me to, if I was going to do a PhD, what I had to do it on was to document the theory that informs Indigenous Australians in the social health area. The theory that informs our work. Why is it we're different? Because if you go to uni, there's nothing, you can't draw on the knowledge of our ancestors because it wasn't written down. Or it was very sort of scattered, and it was really hard without our theory in an academic format. So that was my task, and I got lots of bullying and pushing, and people saying, come on, hurry up, we need it, come on, move it, and okay, well, I'll talk to you now, you interview. And so I had my hand held, and I was bullied and pushed and supported, and it was a wonderful learning experience. I had a expert panel, different from a panel of experts. I mentioned panel of experts and people laughed at me and metaphorically sort of slapped me over the head. But the expert panel were really good. They were really supportive. I felt I was doing it the right way. If I hadn't had that support to be as audacious to take to document the theory that informs Indigenous Australians in the helping professions, I'd had all sorts of people after my blood, you know. It had to be done properly. So I was really pleased with that. That was my first one.
And what made you then decide to do a second one?
You know those bullying people I told us about?
Yes.
People said that I had to, you know, and they told me what I had. They saw it, and far too many people in my first PhD said, you know, nobody's ever asked us what, nobody's ever thought that we've got questions that we want to know about non-Indigenous Australians. So that's what you've got to do your second one on. Yeah. And because my husband's health wasn't good, and it suited me to do it because I was really happy to continue being his carer, and I really wanted to do the project, and because I could, and why not? And, you know, you get these people say, oh, well, you go, blackfellas get given their PhDs. We had a bit of that. And I thought, well, one maybe, two, I don't think so, you know.
No.
So I wanted to show that I was being smart ass as well as smart, you know. But the second one was really interesting, and I don't think I'd have gotten the same results if I hadn't had a PhD at the start.
Yeah. Yeah.
My second one, I interviewed people in the in leadership positions, like heads of department, heads of I'm trying hard here not to identify people because some of these people are pretty big names. Educational departments, medical, and plus, yeah, just ordinary sort of the generic professional people. So I interviewed a lot of really significant people, and it was quite fascinating.
Yeah. What attracts you to research? Because I know a lot of young social workers, they stress the research subject at uni, and then they go, oh my God, research is just so hard. What do you love about it?
Maybe I'm just stubborn, because when in the research subjects at uni, I remember that I'm thinking that it was very much a culture clash, and like being, you know, I'm not quite white, not quite black, you know, and so in that in between, and you think, well, you can really see it really affirmed the identity because you can see it was so very, very white colonialist process, very much data mining, and my sense of social justice and curiosity. And I thought, no, that's not how it is, and I'll show you. And so the research, but research is fascinating because it uncovers new, different ways of knowing, new old ways. What a good researcher does is takes knowledge and transforms it into an easily digestible way. Like one of the proudest things I heard of with my first book was I heard my grandson come and said a friend of his they were both in year 7. He was a young Murray kid, was reading this book, and he was telling me about how wonderful this book was. And my grandson said, that book, who wrote it? Oh, yeah, and he said my name. He said, that's my grandma. And the young fellow didn't believe him because my grandson's even more fair, and they had a big conversation about the book and the fact that I'd done it. But to have a kid at grade 7 reading my work and also having won a literary award for academic publishing, that's the happy point I wanted, you know, so that it's not that academic-y that people can't access it, because once we control knowledge, then a person's controlled. So I think, yeah.
So tell us about this book. What was it called? And
which one? The first one?
We'll talk about the first one first. What was it called, and what gave you the idea of writing about it?
I told you the idea that I was told I had to write it into a book. That was always the purpose of it.
Okay, so it comes from your research?
Yeah, it comes from my research, and I had to really work hard to convince the publisher to publish it, one of Australia's top publishers.
Yeah.
It's a theory for Indigenous Australian health and human service work.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. And what year was that one published?
it came out initially in 2014, and then the publisher sold to Rutledge, and it's came back out in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and the second book you've just written?
the second book I've just written is, well, I haven't got my copies of it yet.
Hey.
Because I'm waiting for it.
Brand new.
Yeah. Apparently some people have gotten it. I hear Anthony Dillon got his copy. The second one is, it's funny because they changed the names on you. It's research into mainstream Australian culture.
Yeah.
And I think it's, in some ways, I felt a bit like, am I being too compliant? But I'm not really. But a lot of people really worked hard to share that information with me. I had to suspend some of the my feelings, I think, at times, because some people expressed how they saw the world, but others were so wonderfully generous with the knowledge they shared. But it was, yeah. But then, in convincing somebody to publish it, because that's always a hard thing. You know, you do the research, and I'm very lucky to have both of them published. But what I saw in that research, I saw that Australian culture, and you've got to suspend the results of the referendum here for a minute, because that is part of, but it doesn't define Australian culture as a whole. When COVID hit, we were fortunate that to be able to see how Australian culture has moved from the colonizer culture, the dollar dreaming is what it's been referred to. The white Australian, non-Indigenous Australians got the dollar dreaming, and people insisted on putting community and loved ones first, so much so that our Conservative government at the time, who wanted to go with the open slather, ended up following the Aboriginal health model of closing borders, restricting access, and the Australian population as a whole mostly complied. There's very, very little who didn't. And that showed to me that the work I'd done was right in assuming that Australian culture is very, very slowly, and not very accurately, changing to absorb more of the Aboriginal culture, whether it's the sentience of country informing that. But it was really quite fascinating to see.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we don't have more than our share of bigots and racists, and they come out of the woodwork, and they're really fighting back against this change. They really are fighting back. But there is change happening, and most people want it to.
Yeah. There's a big buzzword that's going around, and it's been around for a while, but about decolonisation. What does decolonisation mean to you?
Decolonisation is, it's been hijacked. It's been used against us. Same as the term Indigenous. I use the term Indigenous because it's being used against us. If we don't use it, we have it used against us. Decolonisation is about, it's about truth-telling, really. It's about challenging that colonial stance. It's not about telling everyone, the people from the colonised society to pack up and shoot through. What decolonisation is decolonising thinking. It's to bring about a change in the way we see ourselves, we relate to each other. A lot of it is truth telling. It's about breaking down those racial assumptions, the stereotypes, and in a lot of ways, it's about healing and hope.
Yeah. What do you think of what does the term reconciliation mean to you?
Well, it's a bit like one of those words, isn't it? You know, it's bandied around. It's sort of like the raps, you know.
Yeah.
Reconciliation. If you'd have asked me before the voice,
Yeah.
I might have been a bit more polite.
Yeah.
But post the voice, reconciliation really is we've got to teach the other mob how to reconcile with their past. It's about truth telling. It's about that the assumption has always been that Aboriginal Islander people have got to comply and sort of say, oh, thank you for saying sorry. But it's not enough. Then there's mainstream Australian and non-Indigenous Australian, that means including new migrants and non-white new migrants, need to be able to understand what country they're on, who they, and have that basic respect for the opportunities, and also respect for the sentience of the country. So it's a big ask.
I really loved how you worded that then, that reconciliation is really about people reconciling the past. And I think that's the first step. And I always talk about when people talk about working in a trauma-informed practice, my first thing is, if you don't understand history and how recent in history these events sometimes are, the same thing, you need to reconcile history to understand where is this trauma really coming from? Because it's not just from colonization and stolen generation, it's from the history that actually exists that many Australians don't really understand and know how recent this stuff really is.
And some of that history happened 5 minutes ago. Yeah, like I'm living in Townsville, and Townsville's a pretty interesting place where you've got people, if you're not quite white and you're driving a car, then you must have stolen it type attitude. But when I was doing my first PhD especially, I was probably a bit more clued up with the second PhD. But with my first one, there's times when I almost walked away from it, because some of the stuff I was reading, some of the history I was reading was so horrific and so challenging. Yeah. And you think, well, what, why? And I think people need to learn how to work through it. And in my first book, I go through the stages of decolonisation, and it's quite a simple thing. It's a handy process, but one of the key findings in my research was the healing and forgiveness. And the healing is, about, but the sometimes if you can't heal, you've got to forgive yourself for being so. It's about forgiving ourselves so that we can move to a safer space.
Yeah.
And the second one showed that the non-Indigenous colonisers have their own path of dealing with decolonisation.
Yeah. I'm
really quite excited about the second one. So
I'm excited about it too. When is it officially out?
Well, like I said, our mate Anthony, he's got his copy already. So he must have put in an early order.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'd say if you order it now, it can be.
Except the author hasn't got one yet.
I don't have one yet. No, well, actually, what really happened was when the author has to send away for the author's copy, you got to put your own address. So I put my address, except I put my postcode in Cardwell, not the postcode where I'm living now. Yeah. So, and there's Kelso in New South Wales as well as Kelso. So I hope it turns up. I hope.
You might have to go to the bookstore and buy one.
I've just ordered some more, so I've just ordered some. So but hopefully they'll turn up.
Look, I loved your first book, so I'm waiting for the second one. I'm excited about the second one coming. So, and just for all the viewers that are listening, we'll actually have details about where you can get the first copy, the first book, sorry, and the second book as well. So I know Arnie's going to give me some information about where we can actually purchase them. I'll put all that on the YouTube channel. I've got another question. Another statement that gets thrown around lately, or big concepts, is cultural safety. How do you define cultural safety from an Indigenous perspective?
I think you got to start with safety. And there's a lot of things that make people feel unsafe. And if it makes people feel unsafe, then it comes into that cultural safety. Cultural safety, really, I tend to take it one step further. Like, I see it as intercultural respect. We need to have that respect for each person, and the respect and the support and belief and of people's right to be a bit different. Yeah, cultural safety is another one. Now, as soon as we come up with a word, it gets hijacked by the ones who are used against us. Yeah. And cultural safety, and the different programs, and they're all very vital. They're all very important, where people go in and they do
cultural safety training.
Yeah. And some of that, a lot of it's almost like, to my way of thinking, initially I thought, well, that's a bit lame. But if it leaves people feeling more racist, non-Indigenous people feel more racist when they leave, that's not very culturally safe. But sometimes the people presenting it, it's such a culturally unsafe position because they get attacked by the audience, and it can be quite vile. So then the cultural safety program gets watered down. And so my way of thinking is that's really a first stage, and then you need a second stage, which is a bit more in depth, but then you need the intercultural respect, which is really about that true reconciliation, reconciling the past to the present and to the future, because the past is the future, and I think we need to take it one step further. It's one thing to have people sit down and listen to the trials and tribulations, but they've all heard it now, and a lot of them really don't care. Yeah. They tick the box and away they go and continue on there. Sometimes they end up being more racist.
Yeah.
So I think, and with racists, you just got to let them go.
Yeah. You
got to just,
and you don't have the energy to fight them.
Oh, I think you ignore them. Like you want to talk to people who you got a chance of engaging with, who are keen to learn, who at least will ask a sensible question. They might not necessarily agree to it, but oftentimes they'll come back again and again. I was telling a colleague a story about, on Facebook, when you get friends and you think, and who's this person making this nasty comment? And this person just made quite a few quite racist comments. And so I was looking at their profile and I accidentally put add friend. Oh. And I was going to take it off, but before I did, they added me.
Yep.
And I thought, oh. And so I thought, well, I'll wait and see how this turns out. That person went from posting quite racist stuff to now being quite supportive.
Okay.
And I thought, how does this happen? Maybe it was just because they were following the crowd.
Yeah.
But now, and it surprises me sometimes, the stuff they come up with, and are very supportive of our Aboriginal Islander people. Yeah. I thought, this is really, it shows me that people can learn.
If people want to learn, they'll find ways of learning.
Yeah, but if they don't want to learn, go outside and leave the adults talk,
Yeah, yeah. Now, I know that you're also an adjunct professor at a number of universities. And my first question, because people are going to ask, what is an adjunct professor and how do you become an adjunct professor?
It means you're not actually working paid position. You might get a bit of part-time work, but because I was caring for my husband, and you still linked to the uni, and they still, like with my book, the first uni named is James Cook University because that's where I did my first and second PhD, but there's research from it. And so they get, people look and think, oh, gee, that's and with Bachelor, I'm doing a bit of stuff with some PhD. I've got a couple of PhD students there, which are really exciting because I'm an adjunct. I was asked to mark theses. I did two PhD theses I marked this just recently, 2 Indigenous PhD scholars. So we've got 2 new PhDs holders coming on. It's really exciting.
What topics were they talking about?
I've got to bear in mind that some of them I think are good. Well, one is identity and the other is anti-racism.
Okay, cool. Both really great topics to hear from Aboriginal's perspective, that non-Indigenous people really, really need to be able to read these at some stage. What is identity? What is racism? I think they're 2 really great topics. And I know that the research will be more than that, but I think they're really perfect topics to talk about.
I think and I hope the author of the identity one reads it, because I think they really put forward a very strong argument on the diversity of Indigenous identity and how very firm and strong, and the other is, I think the other has got some possibility of making some really big changes in it's in that thesis in the sort of government area, and so we've got some great scholars.
How can we get more Aboriginal people, one, to university and completing degrees to start off with, but how do we get more Aboriginal people into research?
I think once they get through the once going to uni, is making sure there's support there. But I always reckon if I didn't do all mine by distance, I probably wouldn't have finished it, because on campus the level of racism was really quite high. I'm alternatively too black to be white and too white to be black. It depends on who sees what. So I think getting that support is really important, and each university's now got quite good support units. Yes, sometimes they're personality driven, but if a student wants to, they can. A lot of it is finances though, and family responsibility. There's got to be that flexibility, and studying by distance was good because I had that flexibility. And when it comes into research, a lot of it comes down to finances, because not many people can afford to forego a wage to do the research. And if you take a scholarship, that's still a pretty low wage. It's higher than ab study, but you've got, so it's finances, it's the reality of life, it's opportunity, it's having the space in your life. I've talked to many PhD holders across the board. Life gets in the way, they end up with a new child or a new job or family illness, or even I know a person who had to leave uni because the relationship broke up and they end up living in a car. So there's a whole lot of different. So a lot of it's financial support, a lot of it's community support. Like with my first one, I had so much community support. The amount of people that sort of saying, well, "Come on, hurry up," and proofreading my the different bits that I'd done. It was, I felt very supported by the community.
Question I've got is, in university courses in general, and even in high schools, are you seeing more Indigenous perspectives being incorporated into the health-related professions?
I think in high schools there's a little bit more. Like, one of the questions I asked in my second PhD was, how old were the non-Indigenous people when they first heard about stone houses, Aboriginal people in stone houses, and grain storage, and the younger they were, nearly all of the people I interviewed hadn't heard of it until they'd read it in my conversation promoting questions. But so also, because I like research and diarying to people, I put it to younger people, and the young ones, like the checkout person still in school, they say, oh yeah, in year 9. And so we are seeing some changes, and young people are really leading the way. Young people are being more inclusive. As I point out in my second book, this goes against the outcome of the voice, but younger people are saying things like, oh, did you see the way they did that welcome to country? That's tokenistic. You think you'd have put more meaning into it. Or, and so even people who are new migrants, young people who are new migrants, are saying, well, of course we've got to give welcome to country. Of course we've got to pay respect to the elders. If we've got a traditional owner giving a welcome to country, that's a big thing. And so we're seeing that change. So I think there is change, but there's also a lot of fight back against it.
Yeah. Do you have actually any Aboriginal role models that you look up to?
Oh, yes. Some of them aren't here anymore. Buckaroo was a really significant elder in Cardwell and Murrayupper, and he was really a wise person, and a lot of the community a lot of the elders in the Girigan region. The Girigan is a group of 7 tribes, I think it is, in the Cardwell, Tully, Murrayupper area. And so there's a lot of people who sort of took me under their wing. Along the way, there were others, and I do have quite a few people I look up to. Some people I'd be a bit cautious about naming in case they got embarrassed. But Buckaroo was an incredibly, incredibly smart man. He was totally illiterate, but he was such a wise man, and just a little bit of a clever man too.
Yeah. What makes a really great Indigenous leader?
Oh, I'm going to find it. Actually, I do know. In Cardwell, we've got Gerrigan, and I'll use this person as an example, and he will probably roll his eyes and howl with laughter. Bloke called Philip Breast. Now, he was roped in, sort of like me with the doing my first PhD. The elders basically told him, get your act together, get off your bum. This is what you're going to do. You're going to lead this Gerrigan. So he managed to pull together a whole heap of different tribes from the area into the Gerrigan Aboriginal organisation. They really wanted to rename Lumholtz National Park to the Gerrigan National Park, because Lumholtz was the European explorer who was considered quite mad by the local Aboriginal people, but he was really quite negative, and the Aboriginal people looked after him because they reckoned he was a bit womba, And naming that area Lumholtz was quite offensive, so the Gerrigan Aboriginal Corporation was brought together to form this. Now, Philip he was leading from behind, but he was also pushed. He had to be the spokesperson, but because I interviewed him for my first book, and this is why I know his story. He didn't know why. He doesn't know why he was chosen, but he was able to work with key stakeholders. They've got Tumras. In the Gerrigan area, you've got it's sea country and they've got ranges and that, but they actually brought in a ruling very early in the part that there's to be no dugong or turtle caught because there's a shortage of them, same as there was you can't hunt castor, even though it's traditional food. They've got a traditional right until such time as the numbers can sustain it. So this is a push from the Aboriginal community themselves, and Philip was the one who was leading the show. People refer to him as their leader, and then they laugh. If you met Philip Rest, if you don't laugh, you didn't know him. You don't know.
That's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that.
He is a really crazy top class leader. He's a good bloke.
I want to ask you a personal question, but have you ever experienced racism in Australia? Like, have you experienced racism yourself?
Yeah. Like I was saying,
Yeah.
sometimes I get it from both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can be sitting and I'm obviously for some people I'm obviously Aboriginal. I had one joker who told me that it doesn't matter how white doesn't matter how fair skinned I was, I'd always been nothing but a black chin.
Yeah.
And I did swear at him and told him to fornicate off.
Yeah.
And he thought he'd been nice. But on the other hand, too, I've got people who assume that I'm not. And so I hear the most offensive racism.
Yeah.
I was talking to a woman the other day, standing beside her in a shop, and she was going on about how Aboriginal people get double pension, not double dole, double pension. I told her she'd better check Centrelink because it's wrong. And the way she was talking about some of the stuff, and I was able to say, well, that's not right, and this isn't right, and this here, and and when she left, she's saying, why am I told all this stuff if it's not true? Well, because there's power in hate. And she's, I'm going to have to go and look now. Yep. So she's going to go and look at Centrelink to make sure that they can.
We don't get double payments.
Yeah, yeah. I said the only people who got double dole was during COVID, and Aboriginal people were too polite not to point the finger and laugh.
Yeah. And that brings me on to the next question. What are the biggest stereotypes you hear about Aboriginal people?
I'm in Townsville, come on.
Yeah.
Townsville's long fought for the crown,
Yeah.
For a little while, Kalgoorlie had it, but Townsville got it back, I think.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's black kids steal cars, they're all violent, and occasionally you hear the sex offenders, and you trot out the thing. Yeah, and you can challenge these things, but they don't always do it. I was just reading something online where a young person was driving their mother's car, young 18-year-old, and some older woman pulled up next to him and started abusing him.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, he drove to drop his friend off, who was also Murray, and a gang of blokes turned up in a car, wanted to bash him because he was just driving a stolen car.
Oh my God. Yeah.
He's 18. And driving his mother's car, and you think, well, yeah. So we've got the vigilantes around. My grandson's had his photo taken of he's got a nice white ute that he did up himself, him and his father, and personalised plates. And this old lady taking photos of it, and you think, oh, and yeah. So at the moment in Townsville, it's break and enter and car theft. Yeah. It's the biggest stereotypes. And then of course the double dole and the all these, the free house, the free car, and Yeah.
Down here in Melbourne, we hear the Queenslander black fellas, they get free boats as well.
Oh, I heard a good one in Groot. And this is what I talk about, having information is so crucial. People in Groot were told by Sky News that they, in Groot, because their community funded $500 for people who got fully vaccinated against COVID, you know, because Aboriginal people really took this seriously. You know, we were the best in the world with dealing with COVID. But these people are saying, that's not fair. You know, we only got $500 and the other Australians got $1,000 for getting vaccinated. And I was saying, no, that's not right. And I had to show them. And they were shocked why they'd been told this lie.
Yeah.
But they could understand that the mining royalties paid for it, but not the lie, the deliberate lie. So these lies and misinformation are also very actively being used in.
If I could give you a magic wand and said you could change something within Indigenous affairs in Australia, what would you do?
Now that's a bit hard because you'd have to take out the dollar dreaming and you have to take out racism and that sense of self-entitlement of people delivering services, thinking that black money is theirs, that they're more deserving of it because they're not black.
Yeah.
Or not, yeah. Somehow smarter, better. So but racism is probably the biggest thing. Getting rid of greed, I think, would be harder.
Then can you magic wand do both?
Yeah. But, you know, many years ago, it would be like returning back, going back to a time when we had the true egalitarianism in Australia. The egalitarianism that non-Indigenous people now are trying to claim as a trait, and hopefully they will learn how to do it properly. But where we care about sharing and about equity and about, that would be good. I think it's happening slowly, but I think there's still more work to be done.
No, I agree with you. So I've got two final questions, and my second last question is, where do you think we could start making changes and people's understanding around?
Oh, I think the place to start is right now, and I think the place to start is look, we got the wrong end of the stick with addressing racism. A lot of the anti-racist stuff, the cross-cultural stuff, it relies on people knowing how hard done by Aboriginal people are, which is fair enough. That's a fair call. But there's no point that they are being asked to question their own cultural assumptions, their own cultural attributes, their own cultural truths. And I think that's where we've got to start. Like the gloves are off, the voice is done. They're too silly to realise that Aboriginal Islander people are really quite polite, non-violent people. But it's time to now talk plainly and say, try, for example, non-Indigenous people. If I asked you what respect was, and look, I would only give you about 20 minutes because otherwise, you could talk for days about what respect is, right? That's a hallmark of a good, not a good, it's a hallmark of Aboriginal culture, that respect is very complicated. But if you ask a person to explain what respect means to them, a non-Indigenous person, you will see them stutter and stammer and try and if they respect police because they're frightened of them, they respect police because they protect their possessions from black people. They respect the office of the Prime Minister because they're the Prime Minister, they've got power over you. They respect school teachers. Yeah, they respect Rupert Murdoch because he's got lots of money. But a lot of they respect, they can't explain respect in the same way. That was one thing that really people struggled with in my second PhD, in the second research, explaining their culture. Crazy, eh?
It is. I agree with you. I've had conversations with non-Indigenous people about respect. And the other one, as we mentioned before, cultural safety. When I've asked non-Indigenous people, what makes you feel culturally safe, they kind of struggle as well.
Well, so, in my second one, I made sure it was culturally safe and explained it to them. Yeah. And every single person, bar one, thanked me for interviewing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's got to be culturally safe. But when you read it, I think you'll get some ideas and
waiting for it. I'm waiting for it.
Oh, well, you just got to order it.
No, I'll be doing that tonight. The last question I've got is, what would you like people to walk away with after listening to our little podcast today?
I think I would like to people to walk away with an open mind. Sometimes if we're not careful, and it's a hard one to say this because sometimes it's easy to get cranky with one or the other, but I think we've got to look at having an open mind to be able to see that some people are different, and sometimes we've got to grow people up. We've got to work together because we don't have to forego our identity to become respectful of our colleagues, you know, like that's probably not worded real well, but when you look at non-Indigenous people trying to engage with decolonisation, trying to explain their culture, I almost felt sorry for some of them. Like, some of them really struggled, but they kept going because they really wanted to give this resource so that Aboriginal Islander people have got a cross-cultural training manual for working with mainstream Australian culture. And maybe new migrants will also find it useful. So I think it's having an open heart, and if you do engage with the stages of decolonisation, knowing that you can go backwards, like if you discover something, you can go through the stages and take time to heal and get your mind right and then keep going.
Yeah. I want to say thank you for hanging with me today, and I love talking to you, and I love being on posts with you and talking to you offline as well. So I want to say thank you very much, Aunty, for joining us. I also want to say to everybody else, thank you for listening to our podcast tonight. Please thank Aunty, and I'll see you all guys at the next podcast. Thank you.